Hey guys, it's LS, and today I'm going to be doing a video that I will be making more frequently as stuff comes out and as the metas change and everything like that. It's going to be a tier list video where I'm going to do a rundown on tier list with my opinions, and I'm going to give the logic and reasoning behind all the opinions that you'll see presented to you with the tier list for every single role, not just mid, which is something that I previously did before. We'll do it for everything, mid, top, AD carry, jungle, support, the whole shebang. Before I get started on it, I want to mention that the tier list is entirely my opinion. It is not gospel, it is not fact, and some of the opinions that you will see, it comes from me having numerous conversations with other Korean pro friends or just other friends, globally across the world. Most notably, people like Imp and opinions from Dandy. You will also see present inside of the list, as well as like Deft and whatever. So without talking more, we can kind of go into the list. This list will be on patch 4.14, and the date today is August 18th. EU LCS just concluded with Alliance vs Fnatic, and yesterday was Samsung Blue versus KT. So this contains the most recent matches as well as opinions from other games that have been played and whatnot. So, okay. So here we have the tier list. Now we have mid in front of us, and so I'm just going to run down everything and then I'll break it down and go through it. Okay, so tier 1 we have Orianna, Syndra, Twisted Fate, Ahri, Ryze, Yasuo, and Kassadin. Okay, and tier 2 we have Lulu, Fizz, Zillion, Xerath, Karthus, Ziggs, Jayce, and Zed. Tier 2.5, which is basically, it's not good enough to be tier 2, but it's not warranting of a tier 3, is Talon, Kayle, and Lucian. Tier 3 itself is Anivia, Riven, Ezreal, Akali, Leblanc, Annie, Teemo, and Morgana. Tier 3.5 is AP Kog'Maw, Karma. Tier 4 is Katarina, Heimerdinger, Cassiopeia, AP Tristana, Sion, Mordekaiser, and Brand. Tier 5 is all other non-name mid laners. That means something that maybe you decide to pick Rumble mid or something, and it's just probably not really beneficial. And then tier 6 is Victor. Okay, so let's break this down. So basically, when you look at tier 1 or something, okay, Orianna is the bread and butter of mid lane. Now, we saw Riot recently, I believe, nerfed her base attack damage, lowering it from 47 to 41, I believe. But it doesn't defeat the point that she is basically the Lee Sin of mid, or the Thresh of mid lane. And what I mean by that is she's the prince of her, or princess, I guess, because she's a female. She's the princess of her lane, where she's able to do a lot of different roles for her team, and consistently throughout years, she has been unmoved and you can't budge her from mid lane. There's nothing that has changed. She's stayed through every meta. She has survived, the test of time, and she's gone through everything. Different build paths for her have come out to accommodate to the metas and make her viable and continue to be viable throughout League's career for the last year and a half, 2 years almost. Syndra is in here because this tier list is based on the highest levels of play. Syndra is in here because Syndra, in the hands of extremely high-level players, is a force to be reckoned with. Now, she is a champion that requires a team to be built around her in some ways, but for solo queue purposes, she can be used in a majority of circumstances without really having to have a reason for it. Syndra comes with high burst, she is a lane bully, she has amazing control, she has great CC when it reaches the late game, and she scales with cooldown reduction and AP, making her obviously pack a gigantic punch. Also, her mana problems can easily be remedied just by 1 or 2 items, and then she can safely continue building into core items without actually having to have really massive buybacks. And what I mean by that is she's not a champion that is relying on having 3 to 4 or 5, even 5 core items before she becomes relevant. Syndra becomes relevant in the mid game, and then from then on out. So she's quite a powerful pick, and she's really good. Twisted Fate is in here, primarily because of his ability to carry every single lane at once with his ultimate. Also, he has great farming potential. He comes with a really nice punch. With CDR, he has extremely good wave clear, he has extremely good poke, he has extremely good siege. His gold card is really great for disengaging. His gold card can also be used for great, gank support, everything. He kind of has a full bundle, and then his ultimate is really what basically brings him to tier 1. Ahri comes up to tier 1 in lieu of due to the recent buffs, basically. Ahri comes back into tier 1. The buff that she did receive, while it was a little bit minor, it was all that it was needed to really push her back into the top scale of AP mid laners. And that, again, comes from her high mobility, her great control. She does have the charm, and her basic ability to just delete an AD carry, but not only just AD carries, various champions throughout the game. Then you have Ryze inside of tier 1 as well. So Ryze is, I could maybe put him in tier 2, but I feel like he's relatively good against the majority of mid laners, and with the resurgence of Ahri and also the resurgence that will come back of Zed and whatever else, Ryze is relatively good. And if you play him with the Flash Ghost, you factor in his ultimate and whatever, he's relatively also safe in the mid lane, even though it is considered a disadvantage into the late game to go those summoners. So Ryze is a comfort pick for mid lane. Then we have Yasuo, which traditionally for the last few months he has destroyed everything, and he's caused a lot of chaos, not only in Korea but also in Europe and NA. He's one of the best picks in the game because of his high mobility, his great skill ceiling, and then his just high room for outplay. He also synergizes with a ton of champions in the game, and it is really easy to kind of build a team around him and also support his ultimate, making it not really that hard or risky to pick him or anything, making it so that he would have to self-trigger his ult with his own Q. So Yasuo is pretty good, pretty good. And then we have Kassadin, which I'm sure that no one's expecting anything else. Kassadin is... He was arguably the most overpowered mid laner for quite some time, probably one of the most dominant champions in the game for quite some time. And then his ability to roam, his ability to deny ganks, the fact that he has a flash on a 3-second cooldown, and because he's one of the only champions in the game that can go to 6 items with completely neglecting the ability to have to get boots. Which actually is a power in itself, because if you factor in the cost of boots for most champions, that basically means that Kassadin gets 3 kills for free, because he's just able to neglect that gold purchase and just put it into a 6th item elsewhere. So Kassadin's really good in a lot of fronts, and also because of his ability to be the jack of all trades, where he can do almost anything from AP carry to AP off tank to tank it in to split it in to whatever you actually need him to be. So that's pretty good. Tier 2, we have Lulu coming in at tier 2 because of her ability to deny death in the mid lane, and this kind of goes to Orianna, where Lulu is very good against the assassins, but she's also good against the utility mid laners, and she's also good against the AP carry mid laners. So she kind of, again, she is kind of like the jack of all trades, but due to her damage outputs getting lowered over time, and also the slight nerfs that have been given to her, she falls from the tier 1 status. But it doesn't make her unusable. She has a lot of synergence with a lot of the junglers and a lot of the top laners right now, and then she overall is a good pick, and her damage ratios still aren't the worst, I guess. So that's why I would put her at tier 2. Then you have Fizz, who technically got a buff because of the nerf to Athene's, where the magic resist falling off of Fizz is really great because of his periodic damage that she deals. Okay, Fizz is a girl. So Fizz comes back into tier 2 in recent months, mostly because of the nerfs that was given to other AP mid laners, and not actually because of any of the buffs that were given to Fizz or anything that was given to Fizz in terms of itemization or just meta change at all. It was just actually nerfs to the items and the way that the AP mids in prior months could be played. After Fizz, we have Zillion, who, if you've been watching Korea lately, and also maybe a little bit of EU and NALCS, you'll have noticed that Zillion has had a great resurgence because of his insane utility, and because of his ability to cast Guardian Angel sometimes twice throughout an extended fight, which puts him at a quite a potent spot inside of the mid lane right now. Quite a contested pick. Karthus is probably a name maybe some people are like, why is he tier 2 or something? But to be completely honest, Karthus has never gone anywhere. It's just that there was other champions that were more important, and in the ranked 5s play and tournament play, like LCS and stuff, teams are more sculpted, and the pick and ban phase is much more brutal, and Karthus doesn't fit into a lot of what some teams want to do. But it doesn't displace him as an overall pick, because truthfully, nothing's actually happened to Karthus in terms of negativeness or anything that would cause him to drop his tier or anything. He's still an extremely powerful farm engine. His ultimate still does exactly what it does, and he still plays the same role inside of teamfights. That doesn't really change how or what he does or how he builds or whatever. So Karthus actually just is a champion that a lot of people, just because you don't see him or he's not picked or anything, it doesn't change his ability to contend or go up against these other mid laners that you're seeing in the higher tiers. After him, you see Ziggs, who falls to tier 2 out of tier 1 in recent months because of the changes that was given again to the AP mid laners with the Chalice nerf and such, and also the slight nerfs that was given to him by Riot on his skills and abilities. But it doesn't really change too much. He's an extremely niche pick. He has extremely great stall potential, he has great siege potential, he has great poke potential, and he has great counter push potential, or split push, counter split push with his ultimate. So Ziggs is still pretty good. Now, a pick that some people might, again, it's similar to the Karthus pick, is Jayce. Jayce fell out of popularity a while ago because of the nerfs to tier, but then also just the nerfs to Jayce in general with how he can stack the tier and whatever. But then there was the buff to tier, and with the buff to tier and also the buff to Ryze's Q, we saw Ryze's resurgence. There are a handful of Korean Jayce players that are one-trick ponies. Most notably is Gnar Kayle, who, if you follow Reddit or something, you've probably seen montages of that Jayce player. And if you were to watch him on Jayce or something, you wouldn't think that Jayce is a weak champion. And then on top of that, Jayce inside of 5 teams still has a lot of potency. And in other leagues that you don't see televised on Korea, because they're not OGN or NLB, Jayce is still actually picked up frequently by really high-level players that are just simply not OGN or NLB level. But it doesn't take away from where he stands inside of the mid lane and the utility that he gives. And I've said for months that Jayce is he's a sleeper pick, but that's just my opinion. But there's obviously there's a lot of reasoning that goes into that in terms of his damage outputs, his utility that he can grant to teams, and also how the meta is and how we can act against the meta. So that's why I place Jayce where I place him. After him, we have Zed, who just got a minor buff, where his ultimate now allows him to basically position himself better against the enemy. And Zed was always a champion that he's a little bit better than Talon, but he's not as great as Yasuo, where he has extremely good split pushing potential, but the way that the meta shifted, and because of the rise of the utility mids that could deny death with everyone running heal or barrier, and you had Lulu that could just turn on her ultimate, you had Orianna that could just, shield herself or something, you had Ryze that was just, he builds full tank anyway. You had all these mid laners that went against him, and then also the top laners were Shyvana, Renekton, that whole big phase where it was them every single game with Trundle being thrown into the mix. Zed wasn't having the greatest time in the world because he had a lot of hard time killing people, and then also with the rise of the teleport meta and everything, Zed kind of fell out of popularity because split pushing wasn't as easy for him, most notably because the counter split pushers that would go against him would easily fare well. So he fell out of popularity for a lot of reasons, and there was alternatives to running Zed, which was like Flash Cleanse or something. But for the most part, it was just due to meta shift and itemizations and how teams were being built. But with the slight buff to Zed, and also because things are starting to change in the mid lane, and also things are starting to change globally in terms of team comp, Zed is actually a powerful pick again. And tier 2.5, and then when I get lower in the tiers, I'm not going to give as detailed information on why they are the way that they are. It should kind of be self-explanatory, but I will still try to explain it. We have Talon, who it's a champion that's in heavy talk, I guess, at the minute by a lot of people. Where he's like a mix of Yasuo and Zed in terms of the ADs that are in mid, and he has great potential for counterpicking against some of the AP mids that are going to be popular and that have just recently rose to tier 1 or tier 2. So Talon's kind of in a tricky spot, and I put him at tier 2.5 because it's really hard to predict how he'll go right now. If he wasn't in 2.5, he would just be in 2, if people can actually figure him out and understand him better. But if he does end up flopping, then he does just go to tier 3. Okay, so tier 2.5 still is Kayle. This is a champion that got a minor buff, and everyone overreacted, like hypochondriacs or something. And they thought that Kayle was dead and completely out of the game, but it doesn't change anything. The nerfs that were given to Kayle did not change why Kayle was good in competitive play, and it didn't change why Kayle was such a leviathan in terms of gameplay and whatever. It did hurt her in a minor way, and because it hurt her in a minor way and because of the meta shifted, it kind of hinders Kayle, but not to the degree that people are thinking. So I still consider her a really powerful pick, and she's very situational, which is also throughout the entire duration of this video or something, you'll notice that tier 2.5 or 3.5 picks or whatever, or 1.5, it usually means that they fulfill a niche role that enables them to either be one or the other. It doesn't necessarily always mean that they're in between. Yeah. And then Lucian. So if you're on NA or Europe, you're probably rolling your eyes right now and you're like, but you guys can't play Lucian, man, idiot. You know, and like, you don't watch Korea, you don't follow Korean solo queue. Lucian mid is considered the best double AD carry comp in the game right now, and that's mostly because he synergizes extremely well with cooldown reduction, which is the blue buff. His E is free mana, so when he does have blue, he basically steroids the entire lane, and he is an extreme lane bully in terms of ADs, and he's arguably the best AD carry that you can bring mid lane. Also, because of the way that Lucian itemizes differently from other AD carries, especially when he's played mid lane, it enables him to go up against AP mid laners a lot better than most other AD carries, such as like Caitlyn or Twitch or Kog'Maw or Tristana, etc. Because of Lucian's extreme mobility and also because of his ability to have outplay and synergize a lot better with blue buff than most other AD carries. Okay, so tier 3. Anivia, I can't really say too much. Sometimes she works, sometimes she doesn't. It's like a hybrid of a tank. She has extremely good base scaling damage, and she has really good synergence. One of the problems with Anivia is that she takes a lot of time to build up, so it kind of hurts her in some ways. Yes, she's kind of potent with like 2 items or so. I don't want to make too many comments about her. I'm not an Anivia specialist. I haven't like talked to an Anivia specialist, but I've talked to people that have played against her, and I see people's reactions when she's picked and whatever. It doesn't mean that in the hands of an Anivia specialist she's not good or something, or that she can't compete with tier 1s or tier 2s, but for the overall purpose, she kind of falls into this not terrible, but why pick her sort of a thing. And then also some of the other champions that you see in here are of similar stature, where you'll see Riven. Riven's really good, but it's like, why pick her? You know, because she's easily combated against proper team play. It's really easy to coordinate stuff against her, and then in the later stages of the game, versus, you know, teams that have a complete clue of what's going on, it's very easy to handle her, and that's something that I'll get to later when I talk about jungle Riven and top Riven. Then you see Ezreal. That's just basically the dumbed down version of Lucian. He was Korea's response to Kassadin for the longest time inside of Korea, and then, you know, he can be played AP, but I'm not listing him here as an AP, I'm just listing him as an AD carry that's an alternative to Lucian, but there's almost no reason to pick him as an alternative to Lucian. So that's kind of why I just list him tier 3. It's not that he's necessarily bad, but he's outclassed by Lucian. So then you have Leblanc, who kind of, her damage got gutted all across the board. There was the nerfs to Athene's and Chalice. She kind of fell down or whatever. And a lot of people that pick Leblanc, they aren't, like, understanding that because of the nerfs that came to her, she lost a lot of her potency and what she was really good for. That's why she took such a kick in terms of tier potential or whatever. Annie, this is probably something that a lot of people aren't expecting to see or something. She has extremely great farming potential. She is really good against some of the AP and AD mid laners in terms of her lethal damage and her base ratios and her ability to not really have reliance on items in order to stay relevant inside of the game. So Annie is a little bit weird of a pick. I mean, I can't really place her lower and I can't place her higher, so she kind of stuck in this limbo. One of these picks that, of course, I'm probably going to get a lot of flame for, but I have a heavy opinion on it and I have a heavy belief on it, is that Teemo actually isn't bad in top lane or mid lane, and I'll get to that later. Basically, I can't like go into too much detail right now, but he might actually be arguably the best split pusher in the game with the best objective control when it reaches the hyper late game. And obviously that's because of his mushrooms and synergence with CDR. One of the issues that prevents him from being higher in this list, in my opinion, is the nerfs that he suffered in recent times to his shrooms. Also because a lot of these tier 1, tier 2 mid laners absolutely eat him alive, or he's in a very unfavorable situation. Maybe it's like 30-70 or something, as opposed to maybe like 15-85 against some of these mids. It's also really hard for him to synergize ganks with the jungler, and he does have a build-up time where Teemo does need to reach like 2.5, 3 items before he becomes relevant. Whereas some of these other laners or something, they only need like 1.5. You know, one of the other benefits of Teemo is that he doesn't need boots, because Teemo, without movement quintessence or anything, if you're running him 2109 and you have 5 points in W, he has 420 movement speed. Riot. So, then Morgana, and this is a champion that most commonly you'll probably see her on support, but it doesn't change the fact that Morgana can pack a punch. She's an excellent farmer, and she has great CC. And there are some very unique team comps that, even though you don't see them in pro play, they do exist, such as Morgana mid with maybe a Master Yi jungle or something with a Kayle top, and you put on the Black Shield with invulnerability, and Yi runs through the wild. We saw something similar to that, where instead of Yi, you replaced it with Warwick, and that did come out during one of the Korean games. So there's uses to her, but obviously, again, she falls into this limbo. So then 3.5 AP Kog'Maw, this is something that we just recently saw Dade try to play. It has a lot of popularity inside of China. I'm under the opinion, and other mids that I've talked to in Korea are also under the opinion that it's entirely gimmicky, and a lot of the reason that sometimes that it works is because of basically the enemy not knowing how to play against it, not necessarily that it's good or something. Others, and myself included, believe that if it did become frequent in the meta, it would get solved relatively quickly and then fade out just as fast as it came in. But that's just, again, an opinion. And then Karma. Karma can actually pack a huge punch, and she is a lane bully, and one of the things that's really great about her is that she builds a plethora of epic items. And what I mean by an epic item is items that cost between 2,000 to like 2,600 gold, without actually going into those legendary item things that are like 3k plus. And because of that, Karma can hit her power spikes a lot faster, and she comes with an enormous amount of utility that she can grant her team, and then she also does come with extremely good poke and counter poke. So Karma's kind of in that weird place. Tier 4, I know a lot of people are probably going to hate the first thing, the Katarina. But Katarina, Heimerdinger, Cassiopeia, AP Tristana, Sion, Mordekaiser, Brand, these are all just champions that are, like, bad. That's actually just the truth. Like, okay, if you want to play Katarina, why not just play Ahri? It's almost safer. Like, the fact that you're playing the AP mid version of, like, Master Yi that's also gimmicky and, like, even squishier or something, it's really weird. And she just kind of fell out of power. She doesn't have the ability to kill a lot of these mids that are listed higher up in the, the tier scale. She is reliant on getting items, she's reliant on getting fed, she's reliant on so many factors, and then she's also reliant on her team doing a lot of the work for her before a full-on engage goes out. And when you have a mid laner like that, in synergisms with how the top and junglers are right now in terms of the meta, it doesn't put her in a very good spot. The others I don't really have to go into. It's Heimerdinger, Cassiopeia, AP Tristana, Sion, Mordekaiser, Brand. I mean, like, Tier 5, all of the non-name mids. This is for people that they're like, no, but LS, Sona mid's really good. I have a 60%. No, it's not good. Okay? And then below them, all those other ones that you can think of is Victor. Okay. Alright. So, let's scroll down. Okay, and top. So I'll try to, I feel like maybe I spoke quite some time on that one, so I'll try to make this one a little bit quicker, so I apologize. Top tier 0 is Maokai, okay? And it's basically, he doesn't really have a bad matchup. He has better matchups and less favorable matchups, depending on his color. But his insane CC, his damage, his poke, his gank, his 2-on-2 potential, his 3-on-3 potential, it's all just insane. It's in a class of its own. So he's one of the most contested picks globally right now, and it's no surprise that he's tier 0. Tier 1, Gragas falls to tier 1. If this was a few weeks ago, he would be at tier 0 with Maokai, but the tier 1 is because of his damage reduction to minions and overall nerfs to his other areas as well. Ryze is up there, Alistar, and Shyvana. These are pretty standard. Ryze has not moved from the meta for almost 7 months now. He's remained a contested pick. He's always been a very niche pick. He's been consistently good against all of the top meta laners. And he is a hyper carry and a force to be reckoned with because of the ability that he can he scales by building defensively, which is a little bit weird. So Ryze is a good pick. Alistar is something that came into popularity recently, and it was because of the minor buffs that Riot gave him, and he's kind of overshot it, similar to how like Soraka came back into the meta, or how Annie, you know, went to support and became really famous or something for a temporary short time. Alistar, it's unsure at this time if there is just an easy counter to him. After talking with some people, it's believed that Vayne, if he does remain extremely popular, Vayne will come back because Alistar is being rotated around through top jungle and support. And Vayne is arguably the greatest answer to Alistar. But at this time, he's really good against lane swaps, he's really good with roaming, he has extremely good 2v2 and 3-on-3 potential, and he has really great 5v5 potential. So he's good in a myriad of situations. And then Shyvana. She's almost the only tank that has lived through the trials of Test in Time for the last like 8 months or so, where it used to be that trio of Shyvana, Renekton, and Trundle. And yeah, okay. Nidalee, Renekton, Shen, Aurelia, Lulu, Gnar, and Jayce. Okay, so I don't really want to comment on Nidalee. I think everyone understands why Nidalee's here. Renekton is basically like, why pick him when you can pick Shyvana, or you can pick Gragas, you can pick Alistar, you can pick Maokai, you can pick Ryze. Like, he doesn't really do anything anymore. With the way that the metas have shifted, the way that the mid laners have become, he's still okay, but he doesn't have as much relevancy as he once did. Then you have Shen, and this is a champion that, again, he's similar to the talk that I had about Karthus, where his ultimate is his ultimate, and his E is his E. Now, his W and his Q are irrelevant, but the utility that he brings to the team within those two spells, the ability to deny ganks globally, the ability to have extremely powerful 2-on-2s, extremely powerful 3-on-3s, 4-on-4s, 5-on-5s, makes Shen extremely good. And also the fact that he can build tanky while still being an effective split pusher and packing a punch is also really good. We just haven't seen him in recent months because he was disabled, and then when he did become viable again, or unlocked I should say, people aren't, you know, we saw him a little bit, but it's not enough to make him a consistently viable pick. Aurelia's in here. This is a very popular pick in NA and EU, but not so much in Korea, and that's because basically the belief is that when you have champions like this, like Aurelia, Riven, etc., 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 they can be shut down by proper play and proper rotations. Aurelia has a little bit saving grace over someone like Riven or so, partially due to the fact of how she can itemize, and also because of her non-reliance on total team play when the game gets later and later. Okay. Gnar, Lulu is just in here similar to mid lane. Everything that I said about Lulu in the mid lane is relevant to Lulu in the top lane, except for the fact that she's going up against melees, so she has a little bit more like leeway in the matchups. Gnar, I put a question mark here. A lot of people have been using Gnar to great success. He is receiving a lot of picks and bans here, but it's too early to tell. But if I were to rate him based on what I've seen right now, he's tier 2. And then Jayce is the same exact thing as I said in the mid lane. Okay, so then we have Zac, Mundo, Teemo, Lee Sin. Right now, Zac is a champion that we saw Mimer play in the EU LCS, but not a lot of people have picked him. He may not be a competitive pick, but it doesn't destroy the fact that he fits into this list of like team compositions and also like what's needed to be a top laner right now, better than a lot of the other champions that you'll see below. Mundo's really good against double AP, and Mundo's also really good against just guaranteeing getting to the late game. He's also still good against lane swaps, and he doesn't really move from that sense. Teemo goes up to 2.5 in this list over the 3, and that's primarily because, again, he's up against melee laners in here, and he also has some relatively good matchup against the people listed above him. And for reasons that I talked about, maybe I'll make a video on him or something. But when I'm rating him this high, I don't mean it as a troll, because it's genuinely not a troll. Lee Sin falls into a 2.5 position where he is relatively good, he does pack a punch, but why would you commit Lee Sin to top when you can put him in the jungle? Okay, then when you have tier 3, you have like Yasuo, Jax, Kayle, Rengar, Lissandra, Swain, Rumble, Akali, Riven, Zed, Tryndamere, Hecarim. These are all champions, if you notice one common factor about them, they fulfill a very, very specific role, and that's why they're tier 3. If they're ever going to be inside of a team composition and they're placed inside of the top lane, it's because they're fulfilling a role. It's not because overall they are good against these other people that are placed above them, but rather they're meant for something. So that's why they're placed here. And also because they're not worse than the people that you're about to see below them. So we have Darius, Gangplank, Poppy, Kha'Zix, Elise, Vladimir, Quinn, Aatrox, Trundle, and Heimerdinger. Okay? These are all champions that you probably shouldn't see play. Elise, why would you put her top? She has really poor mana control. She has, she doesn't really rely on items, but if you do put her into top lane, what are you doing to your jungler? Because Elise does kind of have like issues in top lane. It's not to mean that she's absolutely terrible. I mean, there are worse top laners that exist, but it just doesn't make sense to put her up there. Kha'Zix is a similar person where he's just so superior inside of the jungle. A lot of people might wonder, why is Poppy in tier 4 when 2 more tiers exist? And because truthfully, if you pick Poppy and you're going to win, you probably have just as much chance as doing so with like a Gangplank or a Darius or a Quinn or an Aatrox. Sorry, Europe, but Aatrox is actually god shit terrible. So that's that list. Trundle is one champion that maybe you guys would have like a disagreement on, but I list him as falling so high because if you look at the most common top laners, it's no longer the very super heavy tanks. I mean, they are still tanks, but not to the same degree as when Trundle was popular. So that's the layman's terms on it. Tier 5 is like Rammus, Nunu, Sion, Garen. Okay, and then tier 6, all their non-named top laners, and that again, that goes back to the same thing that I talked about in mid. Okay, jungle. So this is where stuff gets a little bit easier because I feel like top and mid are the most complex lanes to talk about in terms of like why they exist the way that they are, because they are extremely shaping of the meta in recent times. Thankfully, the jungle meta has not changed too much, and it's very easy to kind of lay everything out. As you can see, like the tier lists are much smaller and it's a lot more constructed, and that's also because it's not as easy to mention what can go into the jungle, but it's also a lot easier to see what does just simply work inside the jungle. So tier 1, we have the 3 kings, basically, of Rengar, Lee Sin, and Elise. And this is not just of my opinion, this is something that, I was directly told when I asked about it, like a week ago or so, from Dan D himself. And then, tier 1.5, these are 2 champions that are extremely, extremely close to going into tier 1. But if a tier 1 exists, for availability for pick or something, they are just that slight, better. And again, this comes down to team play and high level play. It does not mean for solo queue that Evelynn is not on the same, page as like Rengar, Lee Sin, Elise, etc. In fact, I would argue that Evelyn's actually better in some ways because of her cloak ability and whatever. So you have to keep remembering and taking into consideration these things. Evelynn and Jarvan 4, they fall into this niche where Jarvan 4 fulfills a very specific role, but so does Evelynn. But just because they fulfill those specific roles doesn't mean that overall they aren't balanced and extremely well-rounded in other areas. But it's really hard to compete with Lee Sin, the Prince of the Jungle, Elise, and Rengar, who just are really, really good at 2v2s, 3v3s, counter ganks, mobility, you name it, they have it. So it's a little bit awkward for that. Tier 2, you'll notice that there's a line drawn, and this is because I'm having a really hard time. If I could list a tier 2, I wouldn't even list one. I would just jump to tier 3 because the discrepancy between these following junglers and the ones that are listed in tier 1 and tier 1.5 is actually gigantic, which is a little bit awkward, but it's actually true. You have Vi, Kha'Zix, and Maokai. This is pretty self-explanatory. They're not terrible. They have great damage outputs. They have extremely great ultimates. They have great mobility. They have great, CC. Kha'Zix packs, the fact that he's able to be an assassin, plus a tank, plus be really mobile at the same time, and grant support. He's just all around good. Maokai is just basically, if you don't want to put him in top lane, you can kind of put him in jungle. It slows him down a little bit, but it doesn't make him useless because he does still have really, really great gank potential, and he has really great 2v2s and 3v3s. So, it's kind of okay. 2.5 is Nocturne, and this is because basically he falls into a niche role, but it's not as niche of a role as tier 3, but he isn't as just blaringly good as the tier 2s. So it's a little awkward for me to list him higher, but I hope that makes sense. Tier 3, Pantheon, Zed, Fiddlesticks, Kayle, Amumu. These are all champions that you probably don't see that often inside of the jungle. But if they are played in the jungle, they're kind of okay. It doesn't mean that they're unwinnable. Amumu is the king of Bronzodia. You may be familiar with that, where if you don't first ban Amumu or first pick it in Bronze 1 through 5, you are, completely lacking any knowledge of League of Legends, and you should probably uninstall or go back to playing against bots. But, no. So Kayle is in here because she does extremely well with Feral Flare. She's one of the best farming junglers. If she hits late game, it is still Kayle. And with Feral Flare, she's pretty fucking scary. Fiddlesticks is not that bad. He has great mobility, he has great ganks, he has great, 5v5 potential, he does not need a lot of items to scale, he has extremely good solo Drake potential, solo Baron potential, you name it. Zed is basically the hybrid of Shaco meets Lee Sin. That's the best way to describe it. So Zed is like this Freddy Krueger child, where he's able to fulfill a lot of roles. He doesn't need a lot of items, and he has extremely powerful level 1 through 5. Obviously has a powerful level 6, but what I mean is for his counter jungling and stuff, Zed packs an enormous punch, and he comes with a lot of tricks that a lot of people aren't expecting, and he has great ability for getting around wards and whatever, similar to Lee Sin and Shaco. So there's that, and then Pantheon is pretty self-explanatory. He's like a Protoss jungler in the sense that it's pretty hard to mess up as him in some ways. Tier 3.5. These are champions that you almost can't play them in team play. In solo queue they have different tier rankings, but you almost can't play them in team play. I'm actually of a different opinion on Shaco, but the other three are, yeah. A lot of people might argue against this, primarily because Riven was seeing a lot of play from Europe's best jungler, or Europe's best jungler. Shook was playing Riven jungle to great success, but you can quote me on this if they are going to Worlds. If they go to Worlds and he pulls out Riven jungle, you're gonna see how it gets dismantled by Chinese and Korean teams. Because the jungle is gimmicky, and the way that she is reliant, and the way that her ganks are coordinated, and the way that she maneuvers herself around the map, it doesn't work against highly coordinated, highly strategical teams. And that's just because of how the champion is and how she maneuvers and stuff. It doesn't take away from her she is in mid lane or top lane, but it's one of the many problems that she faces, where she's this really powerful thing inside of solo queue, but inside of team play, she has very, very many ways to be shut down. Then also with the nerfs that she received, many, many months ago and stuff, it all adds up. Tier 4 is Wukong, Jax with an asterisk, and Gragas and Zac. This is all pretty self-explanatory. It's like, why would you put them here when you can put them in other lanes? Wukong is pretty bad overall, actually. I don't even think I wrote him in top lane, and I also don't think I even wrote Xin Zhao, now that I think about it. But these are just champions that they escaped my mind because they're really gimmicky, and there's other champions that fulfill everything that they do, but better. The asterisk over Jax is because he's a very common pick inside of solo queue to counter Feral Flare junglers, and that's because Jax is able to have significantly less gold than all of the other opposing Feral Flare junglers and still kill them inside of a split push. So that's why he has this asterisk. Otherwise, Jax jungle is pretty bad. Tier 5, all other non-named champions. Okay, we go down to 80 carries and marksmen. Okay, this is going to be pretty self-explanatory. A lot of this comes from me communicating with Imp, and then I'm also close, I can ask Imp to ask Deft, whatever, and then also just any Korean 80 carry friends that I talk to. But even then, you can also just look at results in Korea, EU, NA, etc. Tier 1, you have the three kings again. You have the holy trio, Tristana, Corki, and Kog'Maw. This kind of goes unchanged. They're all really good hyper carries. They all fulfill a different kind of role. They all have different power spikes, and they all get there differently, which makes them fit into team comps a little bit different. But they all do something that the other 80 carries just simply don't offer, and inside of the way that the current meta exists, and with how the strategical rotational plays and stuff are forming and coming together in recent months, they kind of just find themselves at the top of the pinnacle. And this is also partly due to the changes to 80 carry that was made in recent patches that enables some of these guys to come back up. In tier 2, it's not that these guys aren't bad or are bad or anything, but in recent times they just kind of fell out of flavor, but also some of them received nerfs, most notably Lucian, instead of the 80 carry role. Twitch, if you go back 2 months, was one of the most highly contested AD carries. Same with Lucian. They both got nerfed, one because of how the meta changed, and the other because Riot just took a bat to them. But it doesn't actually take away from the fact that they can still go up against the tier 1s, and they do fulfill stuff that the tier 3s, in my opinion, don't fulfill, and they do still come with quite a powerful packed punch. Tier 3, Caitlyn, Vayne, Jinx, Ezreal, Blue Ezreal, Draven. These are all AD carries that they are really good. They have really good base stats, they have really great utility, they have really great stuff to offer to the team, but they're simply just outclassed by the other 5 AD carries that are listed above them, and it's really awkward. Blue Ezreal was something that was in talks a lot in Korea that was thought to become God tier or tier 1 again if the changes to Morgana were in fact going to have gone through. Similar to Vayne, there was also talks where Vayne would have actually risen up because of the changes to Morgana, which is actually a little bit interesting, but yeah. So then we go into tier 4, and we have Sivir, Varus, Misfortune. These are AD carries that they have a severe problem in a lot of areas, whether it's their range, whether it's their damage, whether it's their itemizations, whether it's how they scale, whether it's how they fall off, whether it's why they fall off. It's just they're completely outclassed by the other, X amount of AD carries above them. And the utility that they grant to the team does not fit into the meta, and it doesn't fit into how team comps currently are working. And when you factor in where a champion also sits inside of its tier list or something, you have to factor in what is it going up against and what is it combat against, okay, in terms of the other lanes and such. So that's, yeah. Tier 5, Ashe and Graves. These are really, really niche picks. Usually Ashe will only be accompanied by 1 or 2 specific supports that are meant for her, and the team comp is entirely built around it. Graves is an AD carry that he's worse than the tier 4s, but he's not worse than the tier 6 and 7. So it's that awkward spot. Quinn and Urgot. Alright, we're moving on. So, okay. Okay, sorry guys. Support. Okay, final. So tier 1, Morgana, Nami, Thresh, Braum. Tier 2, Alistar, Leona. Tier 3, Lulu, Sona, Zillion. Tier 4, Annie, Karma, Soraka, Blitzcrank, Lissandra, Nunu. And tier 5, all of their non-named abstract supports. Tier 1, Morgana, Nami, Thresh, Braum. Okay, so Morgana comes in because of her ability to deny a lot of the CC. Her hitbox is the size of a truck, even though it presents itself as a bicycle. And she has extremely great crowd control. She has extremely great everything. Morgana just, she comes with this amazing punch. Also, the supports that were really good against her and the AD carries that were really good against her fell out of popularity because of the way that the meta evolved. And so because of that, she's able to rise to power. And she does have relatively good base damage and such, and she has good siege under tower, and the 2v2 dynamic, depending on what color you are, because of her pool, and she has really great zoning. So there's a lot that goes into her. Also the fact that she doesn't need too many items to be relevant, and she comes with a punch similar to how Annie did many, many months ago, or even going back almost a year. Nami is a champion that has the ability to offer disengage, engage, utility, great 2v2s, great 3v3s, healing. She has it all. She's up there. Thresh, however, still is the prince of support in the sense that he's similar to Lee Sin or Orianna, and I don't really have to go into a reason why. He has it all as well. He has it in different ways that make him unique as opposed to Nami or something, but he offers more potency to his jungler. He offers more potency inside of contestation fights, depending on the angles in which are presented and whatever. And so Thresh has a lot of utility in that sense. Also the fact that he's AD in bot lane, as opposed to Nami being relatively AP. I mean, Thresh technically is AP on most of his ratios, but his auto attack is more relevant than Nami's during the lane. Braum. This is a champion that when Riot released it, everyone thought it was going to be this super broken support, and truthfully, it kind of was. He goes into almost every single team composition, roughly. He has an extremely powerful passive. He has really great crowd control. He synergizes with everyone on his team. He can 2v2 in any situation, a 3v3, 4v4, 5v5, etc. His ultimate's width and its range is really powerful, and his shield is quite broken because of its ability to deny death on an ally in a lot of circumstances. But not even just one ally, it can be multiple allies. He has ability to deny siege, and he has ability to deny split push. So that's something that some of the other supports don't have, which is kind of neat. Tier 2, we have Alistar and Leona. Alistar is a champion that's better suited right now in the jungle or in top lane, but in the support role, he's not bad at all, with the recent buffs to his ultimate, giving him the increased damage reduction. He kind of came back into play, and he's a support that he's similar to like Karthus or something, where it's not that he necessarily was bad or anything, it's just that he didn't have a role with how the meta was going and whatever, but he's recently come back because of the buffs that he's received, but also because of the shift in the meta. Leona is just another pretty standard support. She has really good ratios on everything in terms of like how she coordinates. She's an extremely powerful lane bully. She's really great. She only necessarily has one counter, or two technically, Morgana and Thresh. If Thresh can, hit his flays correctly or whatever, but Leona offers a lot of utility to the team that some of the other supports don't offer. But it's not that, it makes her good or anything, but the tier 1 supports are better than her. So yeah. Okay, tier 3, Lulu, Sona, Zilean. Zilean's a champion that you would rather just put mid, but if you do put it support, there is some little like cute stuff that you can do with it. You can do the submarine comp, which is like, Twisted Fate mid with Evelynn jungle, Twitch AD carry or something with Zilean. You can even run like a Shen top or like something really ridiculous top to synergize with it well. He has really good potency. We saw him picked a lot, most notably in the recent games with Samsung Blue versus KT. But we've also seen him picked periodically throughout the last couple of months because his ultimate is basically Guardian Angel. And he does have really powerful utility, and his base ratios in lane throughout the early levels is quite a lane bully. Sona is arguably Nami's hardest counter, or that's the belief of her anyway. Crescendo is relatively good, and the rework, it didn't really hurt her, it didn't really help her. She's still kind of just Sona, so yeah. Tier 4 are basically AD carries that fell off for a myriad of reasons, most notably because other supports just happen to have similar skills, but they do it a lot better, or their kit may contain one similar skill, but the rest of their kit is just infinitely better, similar to Blitzcrank versus Thresh. Basically, Annie fell off because the way that the meta shifted, and also because of the itemizations and how Annie changed. Karma is a lane bully that falls off if she doesn't get her itemizations and stuff going. Soraka fell off because of the nerfs that was given to her, but she only also goes with about 280 carries or 380 carries. Blitzcrank is, why would you play him if Thresh is available? And Lissandra is probably something that a lot of people aren't expecting to see as a support pick, but she is. I think with the recent buffs, we might actually even begin to see her again. Nunu is a very, very niche pick. He rounds out the tier 4 list, where he fulfills an extremely specific role, and thus this also prompts me to think that I don't believe I listed Nunu in the jungle, but if I did, I would have to list Nunu at tier 3. Yeah. All the other non-named abstract supports, etc. So let me just go edit this really quick. Okay. Okay, so this is my rundown of the tier list. Again, nothing is gospel, nothing is fact. This is only my opinions. If you want to ask me questions, feel free to do so in the comments below. Feel free to discuss it, and yeah, I hope to make more videos like this in the future and whatever. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope this maybe helps you out for solo queue or something. Don't abide to it, like fact or something for your solo queue experiences or whatever, but maybe this helps you understand the game better or look at like the meta a little bit differently. So okay, bye guys, enjoy it.